Welcome into the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. It's week 14, and normally we would be giving you our starts and streamers, and we kind of are, but we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to be giving you our best and worst starts of the week, but we're going to be breaking these down into some fun categories because honestly, what everyone does, and like to an extent, what even people that are analysts and do this for a living do, you're still just going to look at rankings. You're still just going to look at the numbers. You're still just going to look at the projections, right? And so us coming on here and being like, start these three players, it's not always as helpful. So what we want to do is take a look at the players that stand out the most. And Dave, we came up with 4 categories here, which I'm sure like the names will change along the way. I'm curious to see which one is your favorite. We've got the risk reward player. This could be a running back or a wide receiver. The player with the best matchup can be any position. Our favorite streamer of the week at quarterback or tight end, and then the player that we will not start even if there is a fire. Dave, which one's your favorite?
I think I like the even if there's a fire. That was one that we both kind of came up with brainstorming earlier in the week, and I think most people will get the reference there. But yeah, I think there's always that guy that's kind of at that like RB2, RB3 bubble that a lot of people are forcing into lineups, and I think it's nice to have kind of a sit, a guy that we're saying, nah, don't fall for the trap, and I think that's a good category.
Also, before we get into it, I want to publicly make a statement to everyone because I was not beating the allegations yesterday on the show. Everyone thought I had a black eye, and it was just the lighting and the way it was hitting the hat down into my eye. Look, folks, there we go. No black eye. No, I mean, I do have like
Really
some
take up the
raccoon.
foundation today to try to cover that. See, what I heard happen is that you were out in a bar the other night in Miami, and some guy came up to you and said, "You're the guy that told me that I was supposed to draft Christian McCaffrey first overall, weren't you?" And good
Yeah.
job on the makeup today.
Yeah, Dave, I haven't been to a real bar in years. I'm so not cool
Dude,
anymore.
somebody asked me the other day, they're like, "What are good bars in Colorado Springs?" I'm like, "I don't know. I moved here when I was 33 years old." Like, tell you where to get some good deals on some Christmas decorations.
Exactly. You're looking for cheap furniture? I know exactly where the IKEA is. I can
Yeah.
help you out there. All right, that's enough for us on that. We're gonna jump into these different categories here. Before we do that, I just want to remind everybody you got a couple different ways you can enjoy the show. First, here on YouTube. So if you're watching here, give it a quick like, comment down below some of your start sit questions. We'll be able to answer those. And then if you're listening on the podcast version, dude, Apple, you guys have been crushing it on the Apple podcast reviews. It's been helping us so much. Keep that going. It helps the show get out to more and more people, builds it up. And honestly, who knows what we could have in store for the future? Just a big, expansive new podcast. Dave, let's do the first category here.
Before we do, though, I do want to
Yes.
say, like, earnestly, thank you
Ernest.
to everybody who left podcast reviews. Like we say it all the time, that's the best
Mhm.
way to help this show grow. And we got like 7 new reviews in just this week alone. So if you're listening and you haven't left a review, please continue to do that. It helps move us up the charts, helps new audiences find us. It is literally the best way that you can say thank you to us. And we just want to appreciate everybody that did that this week.
I can buy more makeup for my eyes. That's what we do. All right, let's go to. I want to start this one with the risk reward starts of the week. Who are you going to go with here?
I'm going to be very, very, stumbling through my words here.
Oh, yeah, I know what joke you were going for.
And I'm
You.
not even going to. I'm not even
Oh,
going to. Nope. I'm not
not
even going to
anymore.
touch the
You can't
joke
do it.
anymore. Nope. Sincere McCormick. We like him. The guy that plays for the Las Vegas Raiders. He's a good running back. And I know, like, on paper, it might look like it's kind of a tough matchup against Tampa Bay. We get these ideas built into our heads about teams, and sometimes the situations can change, but we still hold on to that. And for years, like 5 years running, it was like never start your running backs against Tampa Bay. Well, they haven't been very good over the last couple of months, and they actually are allowing running backs to get going on the ground. And Sincere McCormick, this is the risk reward that we're talking about here, and the risk is pretty obvious. This is a year 3 guy who has like 16 career touches in the NFL and couldn't make it off the practice squad over his first couple of seasons, but over these last 2 weeks, he has looked pretty good. And you look at the remaining guys in this Las Vegas backfield, right? We got Amir Abdullah, 10, 11-year vet, 30 something years old, doesn't really have much in his tool bag these days outside of pass protection. We've got Alexander Madison, who flashes here and there, but we know he's just kind of a replacement level player. Zamir White went on a scorching tear at the end of last year, but has been awful so far this season. And that leaves Sincere McCormick. A guy right now is fresh legs. He's young. He looked pretty good. I went back and watched the film from last week, and his first touch of the game, he broke 3 tackles, and he was just running through people, and it was like, wow, we haven't seen anybody in Las Vegas do that this year, and it explains why they continued giving him more touches. He ended up getting an extra 13 touches through the remainder of that game, and the biggest thing for me, and Alfredo, you alluded to this on Monday's show, is that we have seen Antonio Pierce's willingness to kind of ride an unproven guy at the end of the season. He did it last year with Zamir White, and Zamir White was a league winner for a lot of people. Now, there's a kind of similar situation here where it's a young, unproven guy that's never had a big workload before, looks juiced up right now late in the season, is running better than everybody else in the backfield. And Antonio Pierce might lean on him the same way that he did with Zamir White last year. So the risk is obvious. This is a guy who hasn't really done anything in his NFL career, but the reward here is that he gets another 14 plus touches. He was involved in the passing game. We might see an RB1 workload down the stretch here, and given, the state of the Raiders and things of that nature, we're probably not looking at much more than like RB2 upside, but the workload could be there, and there's not much more you can ask for with a running back.
Antonio Pierce is already like coming out and consistently saying that Sincere McCormick has earned more touches in this offense. And I know you mentioned we saw it last year with Zamir White, but honestly, I don't think they have a choice. I think they
Mhm.
have to go with this guy. And like last week against the Chiefs was a really, really tough matchup, and Sincere McCormick looked good. This wasn't something where like Amir Abdullah got hurt and they're like, okay, fine, we'll let him
Right.
play. He started to earn touches. And so like that's what gives me some hope here, but it still is very risky because we have no idea how good or bad the Raiders offense could be on any given week, nor do we know really. I don't know if we can still trust Antonio Pierce yet on how he's going to deliver touches to players. And he kept saying week after week after week, we want to run the ball more than any team in the league, and they were consistently bottom in attempts in the league. And we want to get Zamir White going, and then they would consistently just give the ball to Alex Madison.
Yeah.
So I see both sides of it, and I
Right.
love this. This was going to be my pick.
And I'll also say, like the other big waiver wire guy from this week is Isaac Orendo. And
Mhm.
these guys couldn't be further apart from how they play football. Like Isaac Orendo is the hyper athletic guy, like off the charts athleticism, breakaway speed, all that sort of stuff. Sincere McCormick isn't really that guy. It's kind of interesting watching him play because normally when you do see these young guys, it's the speed and athleticism that sets them apart. But he is just a technician with his footwork and his ability to squeeze in between tackles and his ability to kind of press leverage into blocks. I mean, he is just a very natural runner. He might not have the big play upside where he's going to be ripping off 80-yard touchdowns, but I mean, he's been averaging almost 6 yards per carry over the last 2 weeks when he's getting these opportunities. And he is just a naturally gifted runner. Really fun to watch. Might not have the huge upside, but if he's getting opportunities and he's continuing to make the best of them, he's just going to keep getting touches.
Last thing on McCormick, I had the exact quote from Antonio Pierce here, where he says, "What you're seeing on game days is what we saw every day from practice. A guy that ran hard, that runs through, good vision, decisive, hits the hole. First guy's not tackling him right now, and that's been a big key for us in the run game. He's making the most of his opportunities, and he'll keep getting opportunities." I said last week, I think it was 12 carries he got. Hopefully, we can bump that a little bit more this week.
I
So there
saw
we go.
Sigmund Bloom this morning. He tweeted something. He said, everyone's going crazy about Isaac Garendo, but it would not surprise me if Sincere McCormick outscores Garendo down the stretch. I picked up both in a lot of
Oh,
leagues this week, and that's the plight of a zero running back drafter is you're hoping guys like Sincere McCormick and Isaac Garendo can pan out, but I am thrusting Sincere McCormick into a lot of lineups this week.
yeah, that's kind of what I did too. Just Sincere McCormick because I knew I didn't have enough fab to go out and get Garindo, and I was just let me get McCormick. Let me grab some
Yep.
Patrick Taylor.
Yeah.
Some of these other guys that no one's
Yeah.
looking at.
Is he a Bonaconda? Go ahead and pick him up in your deep leagues. It's just
Eh,
an injury away.
well, an injury and another injury away, but yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm going to give you my risk reward player here, and we'll probably catch some heat for this one because this was also a player that we discussed potentially dropping in your leagues. That's why he's on this part of the show, the risk reward. It's Nick Chubb, running back for the Cleveland Browns. And these Cleveland Pittsburgh matchups are always a slugfest. These are two teams that are going to try to just beat the crap out of each other by running the ball straight at each other's faces. And you'd think because we've seen Russ and Jameis be these excellent passers this year that would, be something we're going to see more passing in this game. Actually, Pittsburgh's had the second highest rushing rate in the league this year, and Cleveland, as a team, they just run a lot more when they're on the road. except for last week. Don't look at last week. That game doesn't count. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain where Jameis throws for like 500 yards. But other than that, like I really am expecting a relatively run heavy game here this week. And week 12 versus Pittsburgh. Nick Chubb had 20 carries. It wasn't a great performance because it was just 59 yards, but he got 2 touchdowns, ended up being the running back 7 in fantasy football. And so just the idea of knowing that, yeah, he could go 20 carries, 59 yards and be totally scoreless and give you next to nothing in the receiving game. But he could also be a 2 touchdown performer and be a top 10 running back, especially in a game like this. Pittsburgh's allowed 10 rushing touchdowns over the last 7 games. And I think Nick Chubb, I mean, the anytime touchdown prop for Nick Chubb seems pretty good for me this week.
Yeah, and the downside and the upside are both so apparent. I mean, he's a perfect player to talk about when we're talking high risk, high reward. He's looked bad, and I'm not gonna like knock Nick Chubb because I don't think it's fair. Like he's coming back from a brutal knee injury. I think the fact that
Yeah.
he's even playing football right now in itself is a miracle. So like, good on Nick Chubb. Love to see you back out there, but he's averaging like just over 2 yards per carry. He has not looked like the Nick Chubb of old, and hopefully, he can have that injury in his rear view by next year. Maybe he shakes it off towards the end of this year. He's only played a handful of games so far and can only get better from here. But this Cleveland offense is just marching down the field with ease with Jameis Winston. So there's going to be scoring opportunities. And yeah, I think the downside here is that he has 12 rushes for 30 yards and no touchdowns. And the upside is that, Jameis Winston does his thing. They drive down the field and he gets a pair of touchdowns. So this is the perfect high risk, high reward guy. Kind of kicking myself. I traded for Nick Chubb in one league right before the trade deadline, but I wish I had gotten a little bit more because this Cleveland offense definitely trending in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, dude, last week they look unstoppable. Jerry Judy ends up looking like the best wide receiver in the league, and
I can't believe
uh,
it. I
it's
still cannot believe it. The revenge game. I mean, I should have known.
it's
Like, I'm
nuts.
kicking myself for not factoring that in. Like, of course, Jerry Judy, like the pettiest wide receiver in the league. Of course, he's going to stick it to his old team, and I just did not see it coming.
I just I want any part of the Cleveland Browns offense right now. Anything involving that aura that Jameis is putting out
Even,
there.
even Elijah Moore, like Elijah
Yeah,
Moore is fantasy relevant now. Did you see though? Like it was literally the best revenge game of all time. No receiver has ever had more receiving yards against his former team than Jerry Judy did last week. Just
beautiful,
craziness.
beautiful, beautiful. All right, let's go to the next category. So that was the risk reward players of Week 14. Let's go to the best matchup. This can be a player from any position across the board: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. Who are the players that we might think about not starting, but their matchup is just phenomenal? And honestly, some of these guys are not even players that we'd think about not starting. They just have phenomenal matchups, and they're going to carry your team.
Yeah, and I like this kind of change in format that we're doing this week because we're always kind of focusing on those guys that are in that like RB2, RB3, wide receiver 3 flex kind of bubble. And sometimes we do need to talk about, there's some loaded teams out there that do have tough decisions. And we kind of laugh when we get these listener questions in where they're like, hey, I've got 3 top 10 receivers and I can only play 2. Who should I bench? So this is one of those where Drake London, has a really, really good matchup this week. And I have been a little bit of a London doubter. I know, I said more of a wide receiver 2 than a wide receiver 1 he was getting drafted to be. But this week I do have him inside my top 10 because he's facing off against Minnesota. Minnesota is allowing the most points per game, fantasy points per game, to opposing wide receivers than any other league. They're allowing over 40 points per game to opposing wide receivers. And we know it. They blitz heavy, so quarterbacks have to throw the ball quickly. They've been good against the run game, and they also have a very potent offense, which forces teams to be on the offensive and drive down the field. Drake London saw 16 targets last week, which was the most he's seen in a game this season. So, there's definitely some concerns about Kirk Cousins. He hasn't looked like himself, especially over these last couple of weeks, but he is still peppering Drake London with targets. So this week, like I said, he's inside my top 10. And there's going to be some people out there that are rostering Drake London and another top 10 receiver. And maybe they have CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson, some other big names. I have Drake London because of the matchup ahead of all of those guys this week. I've got him ahead of Calvin Ridley. I've got him ahead of DJ Moore, Jackson Smith-Njigba, DK Metcalf. So starting him with more confidence this week than I have in just about any other week.
And I'll just throw this out there too. Darnell Mooney is a great start because of this matchup as well. I do want to go like a little bit beyond this and not just, I know this is, with the week 14 starts and sits and all that. Do you have any fear that if Kirk Cousins is benched, Michael Penix might sway this ranking or this projection in any one direction? Or is it kind of just the thought process? It can't get any worse than it is right now.
I mean, Penix, we got to remember he's, one of those guys that's going to be pretty pro ready. He's not a super raw prospect coming into the league. He's an older guy who had a prolific career in college. We saw the way that he was able to support his wide receivers in college, what Roma Dunze was doing and what he's not doing now, and what the remaining guys in Washington are doing now. It just is not the same offense that it was. So I don't have a lot of fears in his ability to support a good passing attack. Of course, it's going to be better with Kirk Cousins, but I still think even with Penix out there, you can get a wide receiver 1 week.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, is the volume that Drake London has been getting throughout the season. And honestly, what I'll just say here is that Kyle Pitts is just not part of this offense, essentially. He's not even there, Dave.
Yeah, I'm sorry if you could see my eyes watering. I got something like a
It's okay.
tickle
No,
in my throat that is really hitting me right now.
we're remembering Kyle Pitts. That's what we're doing. Okay, I'll jump to my player that is in just a phenomenal matchup. And if there was any reason to question whether you were starting Malik Nabers this week, I would say he's a guy that can probably carry your team going up against the New Orleans Saints this week. And since trading Marshawn Lattimore, the corner, from the Saints, they're giving up the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. There's a direct correlation to you lose your best defensive back, you suck against wide receivers. And that's exactly what we're seeing here for the Saints. Over the last 3 games, 4 wide receivers have scored 17 or more fantasy points. Malik Nabers, I think we've been waiting for, is he going to regain what he had early in the season where he's getting peppered with targets, where he's able to produce, there's even a chance for him to score. I think Drew Lock does that for him and does that for the Giants. I think he gives him a new ceiling that we really weren't seeing as the year went on with Daniel Jones or even in the brief time with Tommy DeVito. I'm happily starting Malik Nabers, and I think he carries a lot of people to a win this week going up against the Saints.
Yeah, I think the biggest part in the Malik Nabers analysis that you failed to mention
I
is
always
that
fail to mention
I must-win matchup in my home league to secure by. My opponent has Malik Nabers in his starting lineup, so he's definitely
So
going for
yeah.
45 this week.
Oh yeah. We're looking at 12 catches, 2 touchdowns, 186 yards. Yeah, no, you're toast.
That's actually how I start my rankings process. Is I look at my opponent's lineup and say, well, everybody in his lineup is getting knocked up 15 spots.
Yeah, that's just how it goes. That's fantasy.
Jokes,
All right.
by the way, jokes.
Yeah.
I don't actually do this.
No, yeah.
All right, who
For
are we
everyone
talking about next?
for everyone at home. Yeah, that's not how Dave does his analysis. All right, next category here is the not even if there's a fire, we will not start these players. Dave, you've got a vendetta against this guy.
I do.
And I need you to explain it to the people at home because he's been pretty good.
Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is averaging 3.2 targets and 27 yards per game this year. I mean, I can't. I know people are
Now
starting
do the
him.
fantasy points.
Yeah, the fantasy points are great. They've been really, really nice. But the 8 targets you saw last week was a career high. So I understand the usage has definitely grown, but I still think Calvin Ridley is the wide receiver 1 here. And I know a lot of people are quick to point out the targets and the first reads and the yards per route run from last week being better for Nick Westbrook-Ikhine than Calvin Ridley, but I don't think that we've seen a changing of the guard here. I think that was just kind of a fluky outcome. And yeah, maybe he can find the end zone again. And if he does, great. But the rate at which he is scoring touchdowns is just not something that's sustainable. And I am not falling for the trap. I am always the follow the usage guy. Don't chase touchdowns. And a lot of people right now are going to pick Nick Westbrook-Ikhine up, put him in their lineup, and hope that he can just replicate the top 5 production we've been seeing over the last 2 months. I am not falling for the trap, not even if there's a fire.
I'm willing to put my finger in the trap. I'm willing to do.
I mean, it's a nice matchup against Jacksonville, but I think that they use this matchup to get Calvin Ridley going, a guy who's been a little bit quiet over the last couple of weeks. I don't think that they've just turned Nick Westbrook-Ikhine into their wide receiver 1.
Where do you have Nick Westbrook-Ikhine ranked this week for you?
I have him at wide receiver 46.
Okay. All right. Not too horrible. I have him at wide receiver 40.
So I guess not if there's a fire, but if you don't have 45 better options, yeah. Then I
depends
guess
on how big the fire is. I've got Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine ranked back to back as the wide receivers 39 and 40.
See, I've got Marquez Valdez-Scantling way higher than Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. I've got him as my wide receiver 31. So
But isn't it by
Um,
the same logic Marquez Valdes-Scantling is succeeding the same way that Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is? Just the only difference is there's more injuries for the Saints? Is that the divider for you?
That's partially it, is that, there's more injuries and more opportunities. I also think that Marquez Valdes-Scantling is a bit more polished as a receiver, but also I guess 3.2 targets for Nick Westbrook-Ikhine and 2.8 targets for Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Neither
It's
of
like
them have been great, but if you remove that first game where he only saw 1 targets, I mean, it's a little bit better, 3.3 targets per game as opposed to 3.2. So, no, it's bad regardless. I'm doing it live on air. I'm knocking Marquez Valdes-Scantling down a couple ticks.
so what you guys should take from this is don't start them unless there's just a really big fire and your team is awful and you need to start. But yeah, we're not starting these guys. I'm gonna give you mine. I'm not starting Gus Edwards. I don't care. I don't care how bad I am at running back. I will figure out something else. Someone with some more upside. Give me I'll go in and just start Ray Davis, a person that I know is an absolute backup over Gus Edwards, who is a starter or the presumed starter in Los Angeles right now. Going up against Kansas City, the Chiefs are the worst matchup for running backs in fantasy football. They've allowed just 6 touchdowns all season to running backs, and only one running back has actually run for more than 60 yards. Dave, do you know who it was?
Um, I do, and I'm drawing a blank right now. It was some like backup that we didn't expect to that ended up having a weird game against them, and I'm drawing a blank.
You're absolutely right. It was Sincere McCormick, the
Yep,
guy who
yep,
we talked about
yep.
earlier in the
I knew
show.
that. Yeah.
He is the only running back to have more than 60 rushing yards against the Chiefs. And now you've got this weird three-headed backfield in Los Angeles where it's Gus Edwards, Kimani Vidal, Hassan Haskins. There's not enough volume going around, and I don't know that Gus Edwards really has it anymore either. I think he looked decent in his first game, a couple of carries here and there where he looked like he had some burst, and since then it just has not looked good for Gus. He's not able to escape tackles. He's not able to make guys miss. He's not able to get a long run in there. They've got a young guy in Kamani Vidal. They've got another bigger running back in Hassan Haskins who's going in for goal line carries. There's little to no upside with Gus Edwards, and going up against the Chiefs, it's not great. And somehow, Gus Edwards, Dave, let me list you his fantasy production over the last 4 weeks. This is in PPR, by the way, so
Mhm.
I tried to give him as many points as I possibly could. 5.5 points, 2.7 points, 7.1, 4.3. For that, just give me any other running back that has a decent amount of upside. Any running back that could break a long run, that could get a touchdown, that can catch some passes. Give me anyone else, but I'm not starting Gus Edwards, even if there's a fire.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. I'm looking at my rankings right now. His consensus ranking on the week is wide receiver, or I'm sorry, running back 26. I have him
Crazy.
at running back 34, so much lower and, almost in RB4 territory. And, we talk about it a lot that like injuries, it's not just like a healthy or injured. It's not a binary situation here. Like when you get injured and you come back from injury and they put you back in the game, that doesn't mean you're 100% healthy and you're back to the player you were. That means you're healthy enough to play. And Gus Edwards, an older guy who spent some time on IR, it's not crazy to think that he's just not going to be 100% this year. And maybe he was at the beginning of the season. That's why he looked better then. But now that injury is still lingering. He hasn't been playing like himself. And I think they're just going to continue to deploy this rotational committee. And out of that committee, I don't want the old banged up guy.
And you mentioned the whole thing about how like sometimes these injured players come back and they look good early. A lot of that is because they're well rested. They don't have the conditioning to handle the week to week rigors of being an NFL running back at that time. And
Mhm.
maybe he's better next year, but that doesn't help me this week. And I wanted to add a little more context to the whole like ranking thing because Dave, when we make rankings, I think rankings are pretty subjective to the person that is creating them and even the people that are looking at them. And I think most people who are looking at them are just asking, who do I start? Right. And so for us, I think rankings end up oftentimes just being who are you projecting for more points? It's really hard to try to bake in upside. So even though I will have Gus Edwards as my running back 32 this week, I'm looking below. I would start my running back 35, Jonathan Brooks, over Gus Edwards because I think there's more upside there in the receiving game or a potential touchdown.
We talk about this all the time. Alfredo, as talking about my side shows. Chris Harris, I go on his show about once a month, and we do a rankings episode where we discuss our rankings. And a common theme on that show is how hard it is to make a linear set of rankings, because the reality is there's upside and downside, there's floor and ceiling, there's so many other factors that we can't really put into rankings. And when we were doing the show last week, we were talking about Jonathan Brooks was a perfect example of that. Like, we were ranking him as an RB3, but knowing that his ceiling was very high and that his floor was very low, and that you compare him to a guy like Kenneth Gainwell, you kind of know exactly what Kenneth Gainwell is going to do. He's going to come in the game, he's going to get 4 to 6 touches, he's going to give you a handful of points. In a contest like ECR, expert consensus ranking over on Fantasy Pros, that's essentially a projections contest. It's not a rankings contest where people are trying to get these projections down right. And that's why you see these guys who are complementary running backs who get 4 to 6 touches per game. They're going to be ranked higher than the guys who have the huge ranges of outcomes that can rip off the big plays. It's just such a tough thing that we do. And we know people like rankings, footballguys.com/rankings. Go ahead and check them out. You can see all of our consensus rankings aggregated and customizable to your league settings. It's something that we have to do, but that's also why we do the show. And that's why other people do shows and why people write articles, because then you can kind of add context to these linear rankings.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad we were able to do that here really quickly. All right. Let's go to the final category. And this is pretty similar to what we've done on previous shows. Our favorite streamer of the week. And we're reserving this specifically for quarterbacks and tight ends. Dave, give us your favorite streamer.
Caleb Williams. And I've really tried hard this year not to be the Caleb Williams guy. I don't want my Bears bias bleeding through or anything like that. But it's back-to-back games now where he has looked pretty darn good. Over the last 3 weeks, he is the QB3 in scoring. Back-to-back games with 26 plus points in standard scoring. And you look on the road against San Francisco, looks like it could be a tough matchup on paper, but Nick Bosa isn't practicing right now and he could be out. And Caleb Williams has just been playing red hot. And then you look at this game, Vegas says that the 49ers are 4-point favorites, which could indicate that the Bears are going to be forced to be in a position where they have to throw the ball. Really, what it comes down to, though, more than the matchup, more than what Caleb Williams has done in the recent weeks, is how Thomas Brown has completely revamped this offense. And it's something that, like, a layman like myself could see that, like, the 3 wide receivers in this offense have very specific skill sets, and they weren't being used in these skill sets. We'd see these guys running routes where they would all collide into each other in the middle of the field. Like, nobody was doing what they were supposed to do. You look at it now, DJ Moore's A dot, his average target depth has just completely fallen over the last few weeks. He's being used primarily on screens and slants, little short passes where they can get the ball in his hand where he's dangerous after the catch. Keenan Allen working out of the slot, and he's either going up the seam or underneath, kind of working as that security, that safety valve, I should say, for Caleb Williams. And then Romadunze, a guy who was a deep ball specialist in college, is now running deep routes. It's like everybody is doing their job. Everybody is playing to their strengths. And all of a sudden, this entire offense looks better. And I think this is just going to be one of those things. I think the team's happy that Eberflus is gone. And everybody has taken the high road for the most part, besides Jalen Johnson, who was just like on the Chicago radio saying, like, good, get that bum out of here, basically. But like, I even saw Tevin Jenkins, a guy who has every reason to be outspokenly against Matt Eberflus. Matt Eberflus did not handle Tevin Jenkins' career and injuries the best way over the last couple of years. And they asked him, is the common theme in the locker room positive that he is out of here? And he said, Matt's a great guy. I love Flus. But yeah, you're right, is how he answered the question. It's obvious that this team is fired up to be playing for Thomas Brown. I think this is going to be we're already seeing them trending upward. I think we see that continue through the rest of the season. We talked on yesterday's show, which I loved. It was a really fun episode to record with Joey Wright, talking about players to drop. We talked about dropping Brock Purdy. We talked about dropping Jared Goff. I've got Caleb Williams ranked ahead of both of them this week. I've also got him ranked ahead of Geno going up against Arizona, which is close, but I think that Caleb has more upside because of his scrambling abilities. I've got him ranked ahead of Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston's been lighting it up, but kind of a tough matchup on the road against Pittsburgh. I've got him inside my top 12 this week, starting him with quite a bit of confidence, even on the road against San Francisco.
Yeah, I've got him at quarterback 11. I've got him ahead of Brock Purdy, Russell Wilson, Justin Herbert, Geno Smith, Will Levis, Jameis Winston, Matt Stafford.
I've got him ahead of Herbert and Wilson as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Oh,
firmly
good
in the
kid.
streaming discussion. And he might not be available in a lot of leagues, but in your 10-team, 12-team leagues, if you have been relying on a Justin Herbert or a Brock Purdy or one of those guys, I think now you can safely pivot to Caleb Williams.
I'm happy for you, Dave. I hope that the Bears really do something with Caleb Williams. I feel like we're just gonna have a long off season of discourse of who was really the best quarterback for the Bears to draft at number 1 overall. I hope there's some clarity there. I really
There
don't want to do an entire off season of that.
Well, people are going crazy right now, especially, on these Bears social media circles. Kyle Shanahan was giving a press conference yesterday, and they
Oh
said, "So,
god.
what do you think about that Caleb Williams kid in Chicago?" And his eyes, like, you could just see them start, like, glistening, and he's just like, "One of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen." He's got an arm like nobody in the NFL, and just gushed about Caleb Williams for 2 minutes straight, and as you can imagine, that is making the rounds. I mean, what a lot of people are hoping for now at this point, is if they don't amicably part ways, people are pushing for the Bears to try to trade for Kyle Shanahan, a
Gosh.
la Denver Broncos,
Yeah,
Sean
yeah.
Payton. It's not something you see often, but that's the hope now, is that there's a lot of Bears fans out there saying, "Who needs a first round pick? We can get Kyle Shanahan."
Oh, Bears fans. You love getting gaslighted. All right. Here we go. I'm going to give you my favorite streamer of the week. And Dave, you went with a quarterback. I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go with a tight end. And for this one, I mean, guys, there's so many buys. There's so many injuries. Grant Calcaterra, tight end for the Philadelphia Eagles, is actually streamable this week, going up against the Carolina Panthers. And the Panthers have allowed the most points to tight ends throughout the season. 7 touchdowns allowed over the last 5 games. Now, listen to the buys. Mark Andrews, Dalton Schultz, Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz, all on a buy. Injuries, Dallas Goedert, Taysom Hill. I'm sure there's more that I'm forgetting. Kyle Pitts has an injury of just not scoring points. He's had 1 or fewer fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 weeks. Tight end is back to being kind of a wasteland this week, and I'm willing to just go with the upside of a player who can catch some touchdowns in a high-powered offense, have a decent amount of targets, and this is just a good matchup. Now, there's always the fear that the Eagles get up early and they just run the clock out and they put in their backups. But you know what? The Panthers have actually been keeping games close because their offense has gotten better. So I wouldn't be surprised this game is closer than people expect, and the Eagles do have to pass a bit more. And with AJ Brown being there, Devontae Smith being healthy once again, I think that's going to leave a little bit of an open field for Grant Calcaterra against the Panthers, who, like I mentioned, most fantasy points allowed to tight ends. I'm willing to stream him this week.
Yeah, I think it's very much so a system tight end type of thing here. Like, Dallas Goedert's a good football player, don't get me wrong, but I think that he is very much so a product of this system, and that's why he does well. And I think that when you swap out Dallas Goedert for Grant Calcaterra, it's not a huge downgrade. You're still getting similar production, and 80% of, regular Dallas Goedert production is enough to be a tight end one this week,
Yeah.
especially with all the buys. I we're deep enough in the show that we can get off the rails and talk about our own teams a little bit. I'm in a position where I drafted Evan Ingram, or I'm sorry. I drafted Dalton Kincaid to be my tight end. Big disappointment. And then I picked up Mark Andrews. So I had Mark Andrews and Dalton Kincaid in this league.
Double
Trade
disappointment. Got it.
Yeah, traded Mark Andrews away because I needed the
Mm,
bench space. Then I
mm.
ended up getting Evan Ingram while he was dropped during his injury. So then I had Evan Ingram and Dalton Kincaid. Feeling pretty good about that. So I dropped Dalton Kincaid. Then I had Evan Ingram, started him for a few weeks. When he got hurt, I picked up Taysom Hill. Felt great about having Taysom Hill. So then I cut Evan Ingram. And now, after having had Dalton Kincaid, Mark Andrews, Evan Ingram, and Taysom Hill, I don't have a tight end. Nobody. Scouring the waiver wire this week, looking at Pat Fryermuth and Grant Calcaterra and Cole Kmet, trying to figure out who I need in my lineup.
That's so good.
Really misplayed my hand, but that's the fun of shallow leagues with short benches, is you are just constantly churning. So I've been looking at Calcaterra the last few days. I'm kind of torn between him and Fryermuth. I think I prefer Fryermuth, but haven't picked up either yet.
It's looking pretty good. Look at any food becomes edible when you're that hungry, and it's just
Mhm.
kind of the same thing at tight end, man.
But none of it matters because Malik Nabers is going for 45 against me.
Exactly. Yeah. Just quit now. Yeah. All right, let's go to the listener questions because we still want to keep this as part of this episode. You guys have your start sit questions, and we're going to go through these. Dave, we've got 5 questions here that we are going to run through. And, as always, like I mentioned before, if you guys have more questions, start sit questions, we're going to put those, you should put those, in the comments, and we are going to answer those in the comments here on YouTube. Dave, let's start this one off with a Blue Sky follower. By the way, follow us on Blue Sky. Just look us up by name. Dave Kluge, Alfredo Brown. I'm right there. This listener writes in, first time writing in for the Start Sit show. I'm in a 12-team redraft league, full PPR. Do I play Devontae Adams or David Montgomery in the flex? Dave, this is a perfect example
Easy.
of a player of a excuse me, a team that's got some really good players, and it's pretty loaded.
Yeah, this is easily David Montgomery for me. I am so high on David Montgomery this week. I have David Montgomery ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs. And Jahmyr Gibbs has been great, and he
Whoa.
always does look a little bit better at home, but we're just seeing David Montgomery continuing to outtouch Jahmyr Gibbs and get the majority of the goal line work as well. And maybe I'm putting a little bit too much weight in it, but did you see the thing about Jahmyr Gibbs sharing all of the code words for their plays
Yes,
on
yes,
social
yes.
media?
Yeah.
I'm going down narrative street a little bit this week and thinking that maybe, David Montgomery going up against a divisional foe that he has known well throughout his entire career. I think we see David Montgomery get going tonight. So hopefully I'm not leading you astray. But I have David Montgomery as my RB7 on the week.
Okay, so that's interesting. I have Jahmyr Gibbs as my RB7 and David Montgomery as my RB12, both extremely startable. But
I
I
mean, I've got
think
them both in my top 10, but it's Montgomery
okay,
at RB7 and Jameer Gibbs at RB10 for me.
okay. I think David Montgomery is just gonna be more reliable here than Devontae Adams. Like you have no idea what you're gonna get with the Jets. Absolutely no idea.
I just don't get it, man. Like, I mean, I do get it. The Bears' offensive line sucked, but for years, I watched David Montgomery and I was like, yeah, he's, a league average back, nothing special. And now all of a sudden, like, you give this guy a good culture, a good environment, and a good offensive line. And now he looks like one of the best running backs in the league. Like, good for him. I'm nothing but happy for David Montgomery, but would have loved to see some of that tenacity in Chicago.
I think, and it's funny because I have these guys all ranked really closely this week. I think there's like three running backs that all have a very similar profile. David Montgomery, Josh Jacobs, James Conner. They're all essentially the same dude.
Mhm.
And they're really good NFL running backs. They're built to handle a workload. If you just get them on a good team with a good offensive line, they're going to be incredibly productive. And we're seeing that with a bunch of these guys.
I got Josh Jacobs, one spot behind David Montgomery. James Conner, a few ticks below, but yeah, Josh Jacobs, man, he looks great as well. It's been the year of the old running backs, man. Looking at my rankings right now, Devon Achane, Bijan Robinson, Chase Brown, those are like the only young running backs in my top
Yeah.
10. Like everybody else is, you know, old, grizzled, gray-haired 26-year-olds.
Yeah, no, it's zero RB drafters not beating the allegations this year.
No.
You guys lose. All right, let's go to the next question here. Greg on the other social media platform, it's now referred to as X, formerly Twitter, asks, is Tank Bigsby a startable player this week?
Yeah.
Hmm. Dave, where do you have Tank Bigsby ranked? Is he like one of these guys that you must start? You're not gonna start. You're not even if there's a fire, or is he just kind of like you can stream him if you need to?
I mean, he's also been dealing with some injuries himself. He hasn't looked quite as good as he did earlier in the season. But I got Tank Bigsby as my RB26 on the week.
Yep.
Got him a few spots ahead of Travis Etienne. And it is a tough matchup
Okay.
against Tennessee. Like, when you're starting a running back against Tennessee, you're praying that they can fall into the end zone. And, it's going to be tough. Mac Jones, leading them against Tennessee, but RB26 on the week, so high end RB3. Doesn't mean you need to start him, but he is in that streaming discussion.
A perfect example to give us some context. I would start him over Gus Edwards, who we talked about earlier.
Oh, not even
Like
close
like
for me.
like
Yeah.
easily. I'd keep Tank Bigsby in over. I have him ranked over Jerome Ford, Tajay Spears, Zach Charbonnet, Kareem Hunt. Even I think I put him in that same Nick Chubb, Jalen Warren, Sincere
Sincere
McCormick.
McCormick. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was just gonna say that stuff. Yeah, our rankings must look pretty similar because I have Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift, Sincere McCormick, and Tank Bigsby and Rashad White all
yep,
sitting in the tier
yep,
together.
yep. And then like Isaiah Pacheco's just at the top of that for me.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
I'm a little bit higher on Pacheco. Let's have that conversation real quickly. I know nobody asked about it, but I think a lot of people are going to wonder how this Kansas City backfield is going to shake out.
yeah.
Kareem Hunt stinks. I mean, I'm just
What?
he looked good for a couple of weeks, but man, like 2 games is about all it took for his age to start showing. He has looked absolutely terrible. At first, I was thinking that like maybe Kareem Hunt's good enough that they're not going to rush Isaiah Pacheco back, but they didn't rush him back, but they played him last Thursday, or last Friday, I'm sorry. And Isaiah Pacheco looked okay, and Kareem Hunt still was the leader in touches. But I think we see those sliders quickly move in Isaiah Pacheco's direction, especially with the extended break after playing last Friday. Now he gets a couple of extra days of rest. I've got Isaiah Pacheco as my RB 17 this week and Kareem
Oof.
Hunt outside of my top 30. I mean, I'm making that switch that I think they go back to Pacheco.
See, I think there's just still too much usage and touchdown variance for these guys. It's basically just going to be who's going to get the touchdown. Like, so to me, like Isaiah Pacheco is not that far off from a Nick Chubb or a Rashad White and all these guys that I have like really just kind of bulked in the same area. They're the high risk, high reward guys.
Sorry, I misspoke. I've got him as my RB 19, not 17. So I've
Okay.
got him just behind Najee Harris, Tony Pollard, Isaac Garendo. But I've got Isaiah Pacheco ahead of Rico Dowdle, Chuba
Oh,
Hubbard,
okay.
Nick
I
Chubb. I'm pretty high on him this week.
All right. Disagree. Anyways, let's go to the next one on here. Nick on Twitter is asking Baker or Tua this week at the quarterback spot, Dave.
I think Tua, but let me pull up my quarterback rankings here.
I'm
No,
going
I've got
Baker.
I've got Baker. I've got
Yeah.
Baker. I do like Tua. Always going to like him a little bit more when he's playing at home, but still prefer Baker here. I've got Baker as my QB 6, Tua as my QB 10.
Yeah. Baker for me, QB4, Tua, QB8. All right.
Baker, man, how about it? Like losing his guys and still just going out here. He looks great,
Well,
man. I'm so happy for the Baker Mayfield, whatever resurgence, whatever we want to call it. I don't even know if it's a resurgence
the
because he's
Baker
playing better
Sons.
now than he ever did in Cleveland. Like just the breakout, maybe whatever. Whatever. Good for Baker.
All you have to do is just take part of their name and put it at the beginning of Renaissance. It's the Baker Sons. That's it. All right. Fantasy football on Twitter. That's their name. Is asking Herbert or Love in a 4-point per passing touchdown league. So Justin Herbert or Jordan Love this week for you, Dave.
Whew, I'm eating the cheese on Jordan Love. I've got him as my QB 5 on the week.
Oh, oh, I hated that so much.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, that's like an old timey newspaper headline.
Yeah.
Fans are eating the cheese on Jordan Love. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'll be honest. I'm eating the cheese on Jordan Love too. I've got as my
Yeah.
quarterback 7 this week. I love it. Just being indoors against Detroit. I want that just to be a massive shootout.
I don't know what to make of Justin Herbert, man. Like, it seemed like it was all coming together for like 3 weeks, and then as soon as we got like enough trust in Justin Herbert, there were like inside our top 5 for the week. Put him in your lineups. Great matchup against Atlanta, and then he just stunk. I mean,
Bunch
it's
of idiots. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm a little overreactive. Maybe I'm scorned personally because I started him in a lot of matchups last week and it didn't pay off. But I got Herbert down at QB 12. It's a
14.
I think you can kind of paint either picture in this matchup. We can say that the Chiefs are so blitz heavy that the Chargers are going to want to beat the blitz by just running it down their throats. You could also paint the picture that it's a divisional matchup and Kansas City's going to hang a bunch of points on them and they're going to need to throw to keep up. So I can kind of see it go in either direction. I think Justin Herbert would qualify for that high risk, high reward badge that we were kind of talking about earlier. But I think Jordan Love is the safer play.
Yeah, agreed there. Last question here from Randy. And first of all, Randy wants to let you know, Dave, vanilla. Seriously, vanilla ice cream. This is Rocky
Vanilla ice
Road
cream's
number
great,
one.
man. I don't know. You guys are crazy.
The thing is that like the part that annoys me so much about your vanilla ice cream take, Dave, is that it is the base layer of every other good flavor of
No,
ice cream. It gets
no,
so much better. Rocky Road, cookies and cream, like everything starts at vanilla, and then all they did was
not true.
consistently improve on it.
They don't put vanilla in cookies and cream. Like that's just cookies and
Why?
cream is just cream with cookies in it. It's not vanilla cookies and cream. They
It's
don't
vanilla
add
cream.
vanilla to ice cream before
It's
they
vanilla
add
cream.
chocolate to it.
It's
No,
okay.
vanilla bean is a flavoring in itself. You
Nope.
can get plain ice cream that has no vanilla in it. I do not think there's vanilla in cookies and cream.
I'm googling this right now because it's more important than anything that we are doing on
Yeah,
the
I'm
show at
I'm
this
sorry, Randy. We'll get to your question. We've got a heated ice cream debate here right now. No, vanilla itself has a flavoring. Like we make our own ice cream at home, and we have vanilla bean. They're these dried out little beans, and we crush them into a powder, and then you mix it in, and that's what gives you the flavoring.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Yes, cookies and cream ice cream is typically made with vanilla ice cream. From
Oh,
Bluebell Creamery's vanilla ice cream with chunks of chocolate cream filled cookies. Dreyer's ice cream, vanilla ice cream with crunchy cream
sh-
filled chocolate.
all right.
Haagen Dazs vanilla ice
Alfredo
cream.
1, Dave 0. All right, all right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, vanilla, not
Sorry, Joe. I slipped one there. I don't know if the
I
mic picked that up or not.
I heard a little bit of it. Yeah, it's yeah. Well, edit that out. Edit that out. All
That
right,
was just on
Randy.
you. Shh. I don't want to hear it.
Exactly.
Shh.
Exactly. Let's get to this final question here from Randy. He's asking half PPR league, Jameson Williams or Khalil Shakir. He also says you
Sorry, I'm
guys are
so
great together.
flustered by this. I can't even pull up my rankings right now. What tab am I on here? All right.
Also, Randy gave us a compliment. He said you guys are great together. You know,
Thank you.
like
Yeah, we
cookies
go
and
we
cream.
go together like vanilla and cookies. Khalil Shakir or who? Sorry.
Jameson Williams.
I have Jameson Williams at wide receiver 27 and Khalil Shakir at wide receiver 29. So close. I have the slight preference towards Jameson Williams, but it's my rankings say, and I put a lot of time into these rankings, but it doesn't feel right coming out of my mouth. I think I like Khalil Shakir better. I don't know how I ended up ranking him this way. I think I'm gonna make that switch.
I was gonna say I was surprised. I have
I'm gonna
Khalil
make that
Shakir at wide
switch.
receiver. Yeah, I've got Khalil Shakir ahead of Jameson Williams. Like I'm at wide receiver 29, Jameson at wide receiver 32 going against Green Bay.
Yeah, I just moved it. I got Khalil Shakir one spot ahead of Jameson Williams, wide receiver 27. Jameson Williams at wide receiver 28. And then you want to hear who's at wide receiver 29? Alfredo, this is a crazy one. Ready for it?
Yeah.
Debo Samuel. How the mighty have fallen.
I mean, I don't hate it. I've got Debo a little bit higher. I'm just expecting a little bit of some backfield touches, maybe some running back usage. So I've got him at wide receiver 24, but I'm
Not even
like
the
I don't
usage,
feel
man.
great
He's
about it.
just it's not the usage, it's just he does not look like the player he used to be. He's not
I
breaking
know.
those tackles, he's not ripping off the big plays. We talked about this a lot in the offseason where we said, you look at his age, Debo Samuel's 28 years old, which is like prime for a wide receiver, but he is aging like a running back because he takes those brutal hits. He gets a lot of touches out of the backfield, and he is an old 28.
Yeah. Oh God, that made me feel ancient. You saying an old 28. God,
More
that's
ancient than when I said grizzled and gray haired 26-year-olds.
we got to get off here so you can go eat some vanilla ice cream. That's it for us, guys. We're done for the week here,
Yeah.
but Dave is going to be back tomorrow on the audio side with the news and injury updates throughout the week, and then on Sunday morning with the Sunday morning live start sit show where you got Joey Wright, Jagger May, Jeff Bell, Adam Hutchison, and the whole Football Guys crew helping you out there. As always, we want to thank you guys for watching or listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, we'll see you next time. Adios.